From Public Radio International, this is The World, a co-production of the BBC World Service, PRI, and WGBH Boston. It's Tuesday, June 29th. I'm David Barron. The U.S. arrests 10 suspects on charges of being Russian agents. An 11th is detained in Cyprus. Prosecutors say the spy ring had been operating for more than a decade. Still, you wonder what these folks were up to.
What are they going to do? Go around and simply talk to people and pick up gossip? I mean, you can pick up pretty high gossip reading the daily paper.
Also, a project to provide drinkable water for Africans doesn't go exactly as planned. And we remember the man behind the swatch. Now, this news.
BBC News with Marion Marshall. The man chosen by President Obama to take charge of the American military effort in Afghanistan, General David Petraeus, has warned of an escalation of violence in the coming months. He told his Senate confirmation hearing that the international coalition in Afghanistan was engaged in a contest of wills with the Taliban. Asked about the likelihood of a reconciliation between the Afghan government and the Taliban leaders, General Petraeus was cautiously optimistic.
Whether that is possible, such an agreement, I think, is going to depend on a number of factors that will play out over the course of the summer, including creating a sense among the Taliban that they are going to get hammered in the field and perhaps should look at some options. Now, we've already seen cases where lower and mid-level Taliban leaders have indeed sought to reintegrate.
Shares in European banks have fallen sharply ahead of the withdrawal of a credit facility worth more than $500 billion by the European Central Bank. Mark Gregory has more.
European share indices fell around 3% and the euro slid against other currencies. Traders are worried that Europe's debt problems are about to get worse. The European Central Bank is about to end a programme of support for banks introduced a year ago, which means financial institutions will have to raise more of their own funds, leading to fears about their solvency. Markets are also braced for disappointing news on business confidence in Japan and a poor set of jobs data in the US later this week.
Both Russia and the United States say they don't want the improvement in their relations spoiled by Washington's announcement that it's uncovered a long-established Russian spy ring. 10 suspects were arrested in the US on Sunday, and an 11th was detained today in Cyprus. The Russian Prime Minister, Vladimir Putin, criticized the US authorities for the arrests, but told the visiting former US President Bill Clinton that they shouldn't be allowed to damage the positive gains made. The BBC has learned that the British government is expected to launch an inquiry into allegations that Britain's security services were complicit in the torture of terrorist suspects detained overseas. It's thought the inquiry could be led by a judge with the power to award compensation to victims if it's found that they were tortured with the knowledge of British intelligence officials. Gordon Carrera reports.
None of the allegations so far involves the direct involvement of British intelligence personnel in torture. The accusations instead have focused on forms of complicity with mistreatment by other countries and whether British officers did enough to distance themselves from such actions. Government sources have indicated that an announcement will come soon, but the exact form of an inquiry remains unclear.
Gordon Carrera reporting. You're listening to the latest world news from the BBC. The former leader of Panama, Manuel Noriega, has denied laundering the profits of Colombian cocaine traffickers through French banks. Mr. Noriega, who's on trial in Paris, dismissed the charges against him as a set-up. He said the trial was part of the same American conspiracy which had kept him in jail for 20 years on drug trafficking charges in the United States. If found guilty, Mr. Noriega could face another 10 years in prison. The trial is scheduled to end on Wednesday. One of the world's largest cigarette companies, Imperial Tobacco, is challenging a legal ban on cigarette machines and the display of tobacco products in shops in Scotland. The measures, which will start to come into force next year, have been adopted by the Scottish Parliament with the aim of promoting public health by cutting smoking, especially among the young. Imperial Tobacco is seeking a judicial review on the grounds that the legislation exceeds the powers of the Scottish Parliament. The head of world football, Sepp Blatter, has apologised to England and Mexico for refereeing blunders.